Welcome, welcome. And so glad that you guys can join us for our second Growth Club session. And this one is on awareness and influence. We put that resource out there for you to listen to if you wanted it from Hidden Brain. If you listen to it, that's awesome. I'd love to hear what you think as we continue going. If you didn't listen, I'm going to talk about some of the studies. How I wanted to approach this before I bring the deck up and really get going is how I saw this and how I started looking at all this science and research about, around how we are truly influencing. What I realized more than ever is that we are influencing people much more than we give ourselves credit for. And that we don't even realize as a person, as a team, as a community, how much influence we really have. And, like everything else, like emotional intelligence and everything else, it really all stems from our self-awareness. And so that's what I'm so excited to talk about today, and then have some discussion at the end. What I would love to do in the chat is I would love everyone just to say hi, and where I always think it's super interesting. Where were you born and where are you logging in from today? Where were you born and where are you logging in from today? Awesome. I didn't know you were born in Cleveland, Karen. South Carolina, Rocky. Oh my gosh, I love this. It's always a good question. All right, so I have one more question, and I'm curious. You can write this in the chat, or you can unmute because there are not so many of us. I would love to know, when you think about self-awareness and you think about influence, what is something that comes to your mind, or what is a question that you may have that that you think, gosh, I wonder how it plays out in this situation. Anything come to your mind before I get started on some of the studies and content? Not a thing? Okay, well,
Kim, I was kind of thinking of something, and I think this probably has to do with like what we're experiencing right at different companies, but a counterculture. So like influencing or being an influence in a counterculture where it's okay to not have meetings from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day, and to say, yeah, no, I'm not going to take that meeting, and kind of draw some boundaries between when you actually get to work versus when you do the actual work, and then when you go home for the day. Because I'm seeing it like I was in Minneapolis last week with our people team leadership, and even our one of our chief people had mentioned that a spouse who was hardcore going to the office every day and could never imagine life otherwise has decided now that, yeah, no, maybe like one day a week is enough, right? And so it's influencing that counterculture that we're all kind of experiencing right now.
Yeah. It's an interesting time, right?
Yeah, because there's still that tension between, we know how tradition worked, and
Yes.
kind of would like that return to that tradition. I won't call it normal, but just to that tradition versus, what we're looking to grow into or out of.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah. Okay. So Rocky, I'm going to make a note of that. And when we start, we're going to talk about the self awareness first. And when we get to the influence, let's talk about that. And I don't know if we have any answers, but it's certainly looking at the research around influence. You may come up with some ideas, or as a group, you guys may come up with some ideas. And Paul, did you still need me to repeat the question? Okay. 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 So, anything else before I get going on some of this content? I think, Sherry, one of your things, I difficult influence in difficult situations, or difficult when we get stressed or overwhelmed. So let's talk about that. Obviously mindfulness, and for those of you that I practice mindfulness with, plays a lot into this. So I'm looking down because I'm just looking at getting my deck up, and what I'm going to do is share my screen with you. And I'm just going to go on and off from a deck standpoint. If you want to see everyone, I just want to remind you that you can just do it in gallery view, and then drag it along the top so that you do see everyone still, and see who's on. So talking about awareness and influence. So first thing that I had mentioned was that we use this resource, the influence you have from Hidden Brain. And if you haven't listened to it, I highly, highly recommend listening to it. It really made me think so much. And as a leader, it made me think about, wow, how does this play out in our daily lives? And how does it play out with science and all the research around it? So I want to talk about some of the studies. Please keep in mind that I'm doing a teeny bit around it, and not enough justice to the whole study. So please feel free again to listen to it, and then do some of the research on the references. So why I thought it was so interesting was that this podcast started with talking about this Milgram shock experiment. And I'm curious by, either a show of hands of yes, or thumbs up if you're not on screen, if you've heard about this type of experiment where they shock people. And yeah, okay. So let me just tell you what was so interesting about this. Until they started really looking into the influence, everyone was really looking at these studies about and looking at, well, they were looking at the person giving the shock. So basically, this is what happened. They pulled people in, and they had a test subject. And the test subject, by the way, there was no pain. The backstory is that they had no pain. Okay, there was no real shock being administered to them. And then you had a subject, and that person administered the shock. And the experimenter, the one in the lab coat, was a person who was like, you need to administer this amount of shock, this amount of shock, this amount of shock. So the one that they shared in the podcast was was the test subject starting out and saying, listen, I have a heart problem, and I just want to be really clear that I have a heart problem. So is this going to hurt? And the experimenter said, absolutely not. This is not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt you. It might hurt, you might feel the pain of it, but it won't hurt you. So the next thing you know is that they're giving the shock, and it was a word game. They had to remember and pair up words, like when we were kids. And so he kept missing the words. And the more stressed he got, the more words he missed. And the more words he missed, the experimenter was like, add another shock, add another shock, add another shock. And basically the subject was like, he says he's hurting. He says he's hurting. And yet he kept doing it. And so when they really looked at this, they said, wow, that subject kept doing this. Obviously, there was something going on, and he knew that it was wrong, even though the fake test subject wasn't feeling anything. Okay. So they said they really started analyzing. This is where a lot of this research comes from. They really started analyzing And by the way, this dates back, 40 somewhat years, 30 years. So basically what happened was they started looking at this and saying, wait a minute, what's the real influence here? And what they found was that, wait a minute, we are looking at the wrong person. We're looking at the wrong person. Really, what we need to do is look at the experimenter. The experimenter was the one who was doing this from the first place, and so they said, well, how did he feel? He knew, by the way, that this was a test thing. He knew that the other guy wasn't getting hurt. The subject had no idea. And of course, the fake test subject knew what was going on. So how did the experimenter feel about their influence over the subject? And really what they came to, and this is a quote, we all naturally gravitate to the point of view of the volunteers and not the point of the experimenter, because we instinctively know what it feels like to have other people put us in uncomfortable situations. So I don't know if this happened to you when you were, hearing even a little bit about this, that if you think about yourself, did any of you, I'm curious, show of hands again, who thought about themselves actually giving the shock and like how like awful that would be to give this person the shock when they're like, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here. What an awful place to be in. But the question really is that we are doing that. We immediately go to a frame of reference in our mind. If you're taking notes today, this is a note that I want you to take. We immediately go to the frame of reference of how I would feel if I were the one giving the shock, not from the point of view of the other person or what the goal is. And that is really, really fascinating, because so many times we lose credibility and we don't influence because we're worried about how we would feel. We also know from our experience that it was a bad experience, it was a good experience, and so we go into things based on our own frame of reference. Now, this is of no surprise to me and no surprise, I'm sure, to any of you. What's interesting about it is that when you really take a step back like an observer and think about it and realize that there's much more going on than your frame of reference, because so many times our influence, our frame of reference is not reality. It's a frame of reference that we have. And so that leads us into, and if there are any questions, please raise your hand or speak up. Okay, so please, if there's anything that you want to add, any questions that you have, please, either again unmute or raise your hand. Okay, so now we go into, okay, let's remember, where does emotional intelligence come in? Well, obviously it comes into this, because now let's shift a little bit to us. Let's shift a little bit to, what does this mean? I mean, that experiment is interesting. I'm going to share with you some other experiments, but what does this mean for me or for you? Well, we know from emotional intelligence that 80% of our success in our lives is our emotional intelligence, and 20% are our technical skills, our IQ. And so when we look at this, we say to ourselves, well, there are a lot of factors, obviously, with our emotional intelligence. And the fact is, the number one most important thing on emotional intelligence, baseline of everything, is self-awareness. And with self-awareness, we have to look at us and say to ourselves, what would I do? How do I do it? And realize like what we're doing is really making an enormous difference. And so I want to start by just doing a little self-check. And I'm curious. And in fact, I think we're going to take 5 minutes. And I want to make sure that you're all actually here, because I know that a lot of you are not on camera, and I want to just take literally a couple of minutes, and I would love to go into, well, actually, you know what? I was about to say I'd love to go into groups. Here's the question. Would you like to pair up and discuss this, or would you like to keep going? Put that in the chat or say it out loud, and I will take your lead on that. Okay, keep going, keep going. Okay, fine, fine, fine. Okay, so forget the breakouts. All right, so here's the question. I want you to just take a moment, and I want you to say to yourself, and write down if you want to, I manage my emotions in this way. How do you manage your emotions? What happens when you're triggered? What happens when you get uncomfortable? What happens when someone asks you to do something that you're uncomfortable doing? I want you to ask yourself, how, when you are socially stressed, what happens to you? So these are just things for food for thought, okay? And I want you to go to the next question. When things are out of my control around me, what do I do? What do I do? You know, when things are out of control, I don't know too many people who don't get a little bit stressed, right? Or want to control it, or want to control it. I heard something yesterday, just on a side note. I was listening to something, and they said our biggest problem, and this is so true, we get in our own way. We put things out there, we go, we start a project, and then instead of letting go and letting it happen and let other people doing it, we want to control it. And when we don't feel like we're control it, we get in our own way. When it comes to noticing other people's expressions and reactions, how are you? Are you aware? Do you read a room? Do you know what's happening? So these are just questions that I really want everyone to ask yourself as we go into really thinking about awareness. Now, I want to show you a video of something called the Johari window. And some of you have actually done this with me. And so you know about the Johari window. I don't know if everyone does. I wanted to show it because as we lead into influence and we really think about our emotional intelligence and our self-awareness, it is such a good idea for us to evaluate, where are we in our self-awareness? And do people actually see us the way we see ourselves? And a good question I actually have for you on this, and this is something that I got again from this podcast and then a couple of other articles, is that have any of you worked with a workplace bully? I'm just curious. Any of you ever worked with a workplace bully? Yes? If you would either write in the chat, I see a lot of you. So, okay. So now I have a question for you. I have a question for you. Do you really think that the person knew that they were a workplace bully? Do you think that if someone were to say, you are a complete bully, okay, and then Rocky, here's a question. They knew they were a bully. So here's the question. Do you think they were proud of it? Like, like I had a client once. Okay, exactly. It's so interesting. Now, here's the funny thing. Here's a funny thing about it. Some people know exactly what they're doing, and they think that there's a payoff. Okay, it's I love that, Beverly, part of their persona. I will never forget. I was coaching someone, and the biggest reason I was coaching them was this reason. And I said to them, do you know that people really think you're a bully? And he said, of course I do. And I love that. And then as we got further and further into the coaching, and he realized that he was so ineffective and actually was not creating any movement for himself, what he realized was, oh, maybe this isn't so smart. Now, I'm listening to a book about change by another researcher right now. Her name's Katie Milkman, and it is an unbelievable book, which I will recommend another time. And we'll talk about it another time. And one of the things that I learned yesterday about self-help and growth, and this totally fits into these bullies, is that there are people who do not want to change. They are just completely don't want to change. And then there are people who are called naivetes, which means that I want you to think about, just keep in mind these two words, and then we're going to talk about it after I show you this video. There are naivetes, and then there are the people who are the experts and they are fully aware. They are fully aware. Okay. So I want you, but here's the thing. Interestingly enough, the people, this other group that's fully aware thinks that they don't need anyone around them to help them change. So that's also a very interesting dynamic. All right. So what I want us to do as we go into this is I want you to watch this. The Johari window will be explained to you in just a moment. And again, some of you know it. This is a fabulous video description of it.
I didn't get that.
My watch is listening to me. And as you go through and you're listening to it, I want you to think of two things. I want you to think of yourself, and many of you lead other people. And so I want you to think of the other people around you and where they are. Ultimately, I want to leave this session with us knowing where we are, so we know where influence comes into it. So please take a look at this.
The Johari window. The importance of feedback can be illustrated through the concept of the Johari window. The Johari window is a model created in 1955 by two American psychologists, Joseph Left and Harrington Ingham, hence the name. It is used to help people improve self-awareness and mutual understanding.
Oh, sorry. Did not mean to do that.
The Johari window. The importance of feedback can be illustrated through the concept of the Johari window. The Johari window is a model created in 1955 by two American psychologists, Joseph Left and Harrington Ingham, hence the name. It is used to help people improve self-awareness and mutual understanding between individuals within a group. The Johari window consists of 4 quadrants: the open self, blind self, hidden self, and unknown self, which correspond to the relationship between ourselves and others. The open self is the part of ourselves which we are aware of and are known to others. We operate within this area naturally. This is the part of us which is an open book. The hidden self is the part of ourselves which we feel are too private to share with others, because they may also be embarrassing in some way. People may also be scared of discussing these areas due to feelings of vulnerability. The blind self is the part of ourselves which we do not know about, but others can see. It may be something that we imagine ourselves to be, but others do not observe in us at all. For example, a person who thinks that he is intelligent may in reality not actually be seen by others that way. Finally, the unknown self is the part of ourselves which nobody, not even ourselves, know about. This area is often known as our human potential. This may include abilities that are underestimated or untested due to a lack of opportunity, encouragement, confidence, or training. Uncovering this area may lead to the discovery of hidden talent. Note that in real life, these 4 quadrants are never equal in size and often change over time. When it comes to leadership development, we often want to increase people's open area. This is because people who have a large open area are able to inspire trust, are approachable and easy to talk to, and are seen as people who communicate openly and get along well with others. Established leaders will have larger open areas than new leaders, and they should help to facilitate increasing the size of new leaders' open areas. This is done through 2 things: self-disclosure and feedback. Self-disclosure expands the open area downward, decreasing the size of the hidden area. Established leaders can help new leaders expand their open area into the hidden area by asking personal questions. Feedback, on the other hand, expands the open area to the right, decreasing the size of the blind area. This is where 360 feedback comes in. In this instance, team members should strive to help leaders to expand their open area by offering constructive feedback. Now you can see why feedback is so important in leadership development. Trust leads to better teams, which means a better organization for everyone.
Okay. So what's interesting about the Johari window is while it's talking, that video specifically is talking about feedback, I want you to think about, well, what does that mean for me and my influence and perception? So I'm curious if anyone wants to write in the chat, or if you would, again, if you'd like to unmute. I'm curious to know, when you were watching that video, and some of you, again, you know about Johari, the Johari window. I'm curious to know what came to you and what you think about that when we talk about influence. Any thoughts how this relates? Or there was an aha for you in watching it?
Hey, Kim, I was kind of thinking about the question I had around counterculture and influence. And then when the diagram was showing, expanding the open by self-disclosure or getting feedback. So I was wondering if you're the individual in the room, you're the experimenter that's, in control of the situation and everything else like that. And the people around you just kind of take that as face value, right? Like it can be, it isn't always, but it can be difficult to feel like you can influence the experimenter in the room, right? So do we see a curve down where at some point, if you're at a certain point in your career or title, that people are less likely to give you feedback to help expand that, or you self-disclose less? And that's kind of what I was thinking about as I was watching this.
Oh my gosh, Rocky, I think that's genius, really. First of all, I think that, and you guys can tell me this, I can tell you that based on our experience, I don't think it has to do with title at all. I think it has to do with how transparent a person is and how open they are. So if someone truly has large open and a larger open area, and again, that means large self-awareness, right? That means that they are self-aware of how they're behaving, and they're self-aware of how others see them, because it's not only how I see myself, it's that I see myself and I think others see me this way. I think, and that's where the open is. So I think that the larger, to your point, which is brilliant, I think that the bigger, the thing is that you can have leaders who sit in that open area, and no matter what their title is, you can go to them and say, hey, this is, I think that there are questions about this, or this seems unfair to people. And then there are leaders who, no matter what their title is, they might have even been a peer to you that you would never approach, because the ramifications of that would not be good. In the experiment that was done, it was very interesting because, that subject was like, please let me stop. I don't want to shock him anymore. And the experimenter basically said, no, keep shocking them. And the interesting thing again was that the subject kept doing it. So the question becomes, where does courage fit in? How much do we get influenced? How much do we allow ourselves? Where does the stigma of the social stress come in? There are some major things that play into this, and ultimately we work less effectively. So the question, when you think about the person who's sort of mandating this in your company, the question becomes, I wonder if this is an open discussion and something to discuss, to really come up with a plan, or is this a mandate? And wow, if I'm the subject who's administering the shocks, what do I do? So, I don't know, Karen, I saw you get back on camera, so I kind of feel like you want to say something. Maybe not, but I'm curious to know, because you sat in that seat many times.
Actually, I had something different to bring up, but I think you're spot on, and I think that sometimes we make choices on when we participate and when we don't, where we're going to take the risk and where we're not. And that kind of leads to what I was going to say is that as an HR professional and as HR leader, I felt throughout my career that I had to have a lot of myself hidden, because you have to be an impartial person when you're dealing with a lot of different employee interests and things like that. And I wonder if that was something I imposed on myself versus the reality, because it was something that I felt I needed to do, but was that really the truth?
Yeah, so good. It's so true, right? Because it does go back to when we think about it and we really don't even realize the influence we have, how could that have been different by being more in that open area? Yeah. Yeah. Very, very good. Very good points. Anyone else want to add anything to this?
This is Sherry. And I think just, when you are trying to, uncover your blind spots, especially if you are a leader and you ask for feedback, I think that there is a hesitation for someone to give you that feedback. And it could be even if they, it's just such an unnatural thing, I think, to say something negative about someone that's in authority over you. And then it could trigger things like fear of retaliation. Sure. Or what if you give the feedback and then the leader doesn't do anything with it, then that even makes the gap, the trust gap wider.
Yes. And it goes to, again, are they even aware of the influence they have because of behavior, because of a title? So again, it's food for thought for us to realize that no matter where we sit, we influence, again, so much more, which again, we're going to get into in just a minute. Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that feedback. Sometimes they're asking for feedback, but you really don't know if they're asking for feedback or not. Sometimes we get asked questions. I'm in the engineering area, and of course, we all got supervisors and bosses, and sometimes they say, well, can you think about maybe trying this, or do you think this would work? And you got to kind of listen to them and look at them, and you have to ask, are they really looking for feedback, or are they telling you need to go in a certain direction, but they're just putting it into a question form?
Yes.
So yeah, that's really an interesting concept, and sometimes you got to be careful exactly, are they really asking for feedback, or are they putting it in a question form and just kind of providing directive?
Yeah, for sure. What I'm hearing is that we could do a full session just on feedback, right? So maybe we should do that next month. Okay, so come back. You're so right. So it comes back to self-awareness and then the influence. And again, the feedback, just even Paul, what you just said too, it goes to all of your comments, which are, is it a question? And am I aware enough? Am I self-aware enough to know where this is coming? Am I open enough to be self-aware enough? And what's in my blind area? I always share this story that I used to get so stressed out about like little things that would happen. And so, I definitely felt that it was like, I knew I got stressed out. And then one day, someone who worked for me said, Kim, it's not fun working for you. And I really thought that I was so much fun to work for. So I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, I get stressed, but it's fine. And she said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, you get stressed, then you're done with the stress, and everyone else is fully stressed out for like the day. And you're like, hey, want to go grab lunch? So it was a huge aha for me. I have a joke when I tell the story that I said to them when they said that to me, okay, you can get out. But I didn't really say that. I really just, it didn't feel very good. And then I started thinking, gosh, if I really want to be the leader that I want to be and who I want to be, then I need to think about that. So that leads me into the next question for all of you. I want you to really think about this. Where are you on the Johari window? And where is your self-awareness? And are you aware? And are you open to being aware? And when someone says something to you and you're like, whatever, and then and then you might hear it again and you might say whatever. Reminds me of years ago, I heard this story and I just love it. The green tail. So someone comes up to you and they say, you have a green tail. And you're like, whatever. And then someone else comes up to you and they say, you have a green tail. And you're like, I just heard that, but okay, I don't know what people are seeing. And then a third person comes up to you and a fourth, and they say, where'd you get that green tail? And all of a sudden, if you're smart, you turn around and what do? You look, right? So all of a sudden you're like, oh God, gosh, maybe I have a green tail and maybe it's not helping me. And maybe it's not helping me. So again, it goes into where are you? All of you are on this call, so everyone wants to grow. For people who don't want to grow, even when they have the opportunity to, they just don't take it. So the question is, now what do I do with this? And again, how much influence do I have? So what I want to share with you is something that they talk about in this in that podcast. And then there is a huge amount of research around this. And I think I love this. It is fascinating. It's something called ego-centric bias. Okay, so I want you to think about this. I want you to think about a party, a meeting, so I say party, social event. I don't know. It's been so long. But if you've been to, just think about before, or unless you've gone to something recently, something where you were going somewhere and you did not want to be there. Either you felt insecure, or you felt like you shouldn't be there, or you felt like, I don't really like the people who are here. Any of those feelings. I am curious to ask you, how did you feel? Did you feel like you were influencing them, or did you feel like all of those people who you were preparing yourself for were influencing you? Any thoughts on that? Like, were you paying attention to anything about what you were putting out? Yeah. So it reminds me of something, an event that I went to. It was a personal social event. And it was very social, like everyone that I don't know, they're just very social. I'm not as social. I know, believe it or not. Anyway, so for those of you that know me, you're cracking up. But anyway, but there are, I just, I love what you wrote, Kim. You tend to judge them. Like, I was judging them because I didn't really want to be there with them. So I went to this event and I'm like, oh, all right, they're kind of snotty, I mean, this is a personal thing. So my friend Karen turned around to me and she said to me, we were talking and then someone walked away and I said, I don't know, I just think that she's so judgmental. And my friend said to me, Kim, if you put a smile on your face and you acted like you want to be here, you might get a different response. And I was like, all right, I heard it. So I did. I put a smile on my face. I took a breath and I said, who are you, Kim? And I just closed my eyes and started thinking about who I am and where I'm most comfortable. Of course, where I'm most comfortable are my close friends, my family, and you guys, people I work with. And in my work situation, I'm most comfortable. Like, I love this. So I just thought, this is who I am. And then I went out, so to speak, and I had the best time because I realized like how what I was putting out was completely affecting them. So when I was listening to all of these studies about egocentric bias, it made me realize every meeting we're in, every event we go to, every phone call we're on, if we approached it by, I have more influence than I realize, it would be a game changer. It would be a game changer. And so that takes us to some other studies that were done. And I want to share some of the studies, just more on egocentric bias, just so you know. The egocentric bias, the tendency to rely too heavily on one's own perspective and or have a higher opinion of oneself than reality. Meaning, listen, it means that you think everything's revolving around you. And if we're judging or we're thinking about, like I did with those people, I am more concerned about what's happening with me, which sounds like I don't have a higher opinion, but in reality, it does, because we're thinking about ourselves. The next thing is that people are consumed with their own perceptions, that they fail to see what the interaction feels like to the other person. So I'm going to challenge all of us to say right here, and we'll go into it in the next slide too, or a couple of slides, how do you want to make people feel? Because if we have self-awareness and we're building it on how we influence, can you imagine the outcome? So, and the last thing is that we are influenced. You know, Karen, as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about your girls, and I'm thinking like they're at the time of their life where they really have this opportunity because they're doing businesses. And, you know, how do you make people feel? Just as something that came to me, you know, as we're talking about this. We are influenced by situations. Many of us will do things because of the situation, because the situation prompts it. So again, I want us to remember that our egocentric bias goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is, how would I feel in a situation? I have had this before, and because of this, I feel like this in a situation. So here's some other studies I want to share with you quickly. Basically, here's the study. The study is they asked researchers to go into a New York subway, and they wanted them to go up and ask a stranger to fill out a survey. And then the other one was asking a stranger for their seat. And the people who had to do it were like mortified. They're like, I don't want to do it. This is so uncomfortable. This is so uncomfortable. They're going to hate me. I don't think they're going to like me. They're not going to listen to me. Well, ultimately, what was really interesting about this is that as distressing as it was, it turned out to be very positive. In fact, listen to the researcher talk about this. So hold on to and listen to this.
So it's really interesting because in the studies, it's like watching people go on this emotional roller coaster. They come in not knowing what to expect, and we tell them you're going to go out onto campus and ask people to do something, and they just hate that idea. You know, they're like terrified. They ask all sorts of questions like, what if I can't do it? What if everybody says no? You know, or they'll say, you know, what if it takes more than an hour, because we would allocate an hour to the task. But they have this expectation that it's going to be awful and it's going to be super time consuming. And it almost invariably takes less time than they expect and is easier than they expect, and people are nicer to them than they expect. And so they come back to the lab and they're in such a great mood and they're amazed, and they kind of bound back into the lab. So you do see them have this sort of aha moment from doing the study, which makes, you know, it would make you think that maybe people can learn. But at the same time, I think a lot of people say, well, if it's so easy to learn, then why do we continue to have this bias, right? Why does it persist? Why am I even finding it at all? And I think we just, in ordinary life, don't actually ask people if we think they're going to say no. And so we don't go through something like this.
So it's just, you know, the study goes in more and more and more.
So it's really,
and ultimately what we find is that, again, people, as we interact, are so focused on their own personal anxieties and insecurities and concerns with embarrassment that they don't realize that other people are feeling things too. And that's really, really big. And that being so inwardly focused on our own anxiety makes it so difficult for us to recognize what the situation really is. And I think that this is just such a leveler. You know, it's something that just brings us back and makes us really think about, wow, is this happening? Is this happening in my meetings? How am I showing up? Is this happening with friends? Is it happening in my social situations where I'm so inwardly concerned and so inwardly have anxiety about something that really what I'm thinking is that the other person doesn't want to be there, and really that isn't happening at all. And so that takes us to this whole thing where I asked you about at the beginning, which is the workplace bully and knowing, do they know they're bullies? Do they not know they're bullies? And the fact is that most people don't know they're bullies. Through the data, it shows us that they don't, that their self-awareness is actually lacking. And then, of course, you have the people who are proud of it, but what they really don't know as far as that Johari window, it's like me stressing out. They have no idea inherently what it's doing to other people. And the majority of people are not narcissistic, but those that are, we'll put them in a category by themselves. And everyone else, if they really knew and you said to them, who are you? That's not what they're trying to accomplish. There's a wonderful part of some of the studies that show this one woman. It's fascinating. If you didn't listen to it, again, I really encourage you to go listen to that Hidden Brain episode. That she was a traffic controller, and she was landing 2 major planes, and her boss was like screaming at her and screaming curse words at her, and what are you doing? And he's screaming at her, and she land the planes. And so she said, so there were 2 planes, one lower, one higher. She told the higher one to come down. And luckily enough, the people, the pilot in the higher airplane could see the lower airplane right underneath them and said, no, we're not coming. And she knew immediately. But because of the social stress that was being caused around her, everything shuts down. I mean, that's everything in our brain shut down. We go into amygdala hijack. We stop functioning. Our eyes actually close in. We can't see as well. So what that does to us is it just causes huge things. The other thing is that, again, the influence that someone else can cause or we can cause is so big. And again, it goes back to our self-awareness. Vanessa Bones, who you just heard, she wrote a book called You Have More Influence Than You Think. And it is really, really amazing, with amazing research on this. And then ultimately, what does this tell us? It tells us that you have more impact than you think. And so own it. And if you're not quite sure where the self-awareness is, then ask people, what do they think? How do you come across? And you ask people who trust you. I want you to think about your brand. We talk about brand a lot, who you are, and an authentic brand of how you're showing up, and how you're showing up in today's world. And the really to think about who am I? And am I doing that? And realize that because this is happening in our brains, because we have this ego-centric bias, we might actually be hurting ourselves with our brand. And this could be in every type of relationship, from our kids to our parents, to our, extended families, to our colleagues, to volunteering, to Jackie, to the kids who you teach. So this is, it's really astounding if we give this some thought. And, I think I love this quote by Stephen Covey, because I do think that this goes into also what we do on a daily basis for those of us who work. So when you in a company, and really everything that we do, when you show deep empathy towards others, their defensive energy goes down and positive energy replaces it. That's when you can get more creative in solving the problems. So basically what we're saying to pull this all together is that you have self-awareness. You show through self-awareness, you show the type of influence, you show up to realize that they're not affecting you. You have the ability, we each have the ability to affect other people so greatly. And ultimately we can't control what happens, but we can definitely control our experience. And so that really, I thought this subject was just fascinating. The studies are fascinating, and just so glad we could be on today so that we could share it and discuss it. I'm gonna stop this in 1 second. I do just want to say that we started a comment corner on our website, and would so love your comments. And you can just go to id360inc.com and you'll see the comment corner, and would love that. So with that, we have a few minutes, and I would love, we have about 8 minutes. And so I would love to open it up. Oh, yes. Hold on. Beverly, let me go back. I'll show you the slide again. Did you want the, which slide did you want? This one or the one before? Not sure if she's still here. Oh, Beverly. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good. Did you, or am I okay to take it off? Or are you good? Okay. And if anyone wants the deck, please let me know. I'll send it to you as well. Okay. Anything that you want to, any ahas today, any thoughts that you would like to share? Any going back? I think, you know, from the counterculture, I think Rocky, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, it was really interesting how you put those together. I love that. And I think that the person who is ultimately giving the say-so is the experimenter. So yeah. Any thoughts that any of you would like to share?
This is Sherry.
It's a little. Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. I was going to say, you know, for me, the biggest takeaway was, you know, that the blind self, you know, so when we do, and that's what we're curious about, right? What are other people seeing? And maybe we have a sense of it, but, you know, and I'm just thinking like the blind self, they're thinking, oh, so-and-so is like such and such, right? And when you get that information, you know, that's a very humbling thing. And so, you know, hot tips for what to do with that information once you get brave enough to solicit the feedback.
Yeah. Yes, I would love to give you a tip. So the biggest tip is delve. Number one, get more information about what they mean. Do not assume because they say something that you're like, oh, I have a green tail, or, oh, I stress, or I don't do this well, or I'm not speaking up enough. Get information. Say, give me specifics. And then, Sherry, the next step is thank you so much. And the next step is, when can we have a recap so I can ask you how I'm doing? So you follow up. When you do this, you create huge advocates. So from someone who may not have been your advocate to begin with, and they're giving you feedback, or they could turn into your biggest advocate because you listened, you asked them, and you checked back with them. Now, if it's someone who you don't trust and believe, then you take it, maybe go check with a few more people without the gossiping, but just, you know, just the like, hey, I'm so curious. Do you see this in me? And I really do want to know, because if I do, that's not how I want to be. So it's also being really clear of who you want to show up as, who you are, right? Who we authentically are, and are we showing up to be that person? Did that give you some tips on what to do? Good. Carlene, what's up?
That going very similar to what Sherry just said, that blind self, you know, just not being aware of how we are perceived, or having an incorrect vision of how we're perceived, but also that hidden self.
Yeah.
Now I recognize that I have a big part of that.
Yeah.
And so I need to work on that in order to both be able to see that blind self and for other people to see me as more authentic.
Exactly. You know, sometimes we try to influence people, and we think how we're influencing them is coming from, let's say, point A, right? So we think that we're all on the same page, but they're seeing someone different. So what we're doing is never really getting to meet our outcome, because they're seeing something different. So until we line it up, until we become truly aware, and it doesn't mean we're not asking people to define us. We're just seeing, I know who I am, so it's getting really clear with who you are. And then saying, am I behaving that way? Am I aligned inside and outside? And I think once we are doing that, then we can truly say, okay, why are people reading me this way? Why are they not? So I think that there are steps to that. I could say that for myself. You know, it's funny. I said to most of you, Karen was literally my first client ever when I was all of, I don't know, 22 or 23 years old. And so, you know, when I think about it, I mean, we were different back then, Karen. You know, when we taught different things, we did not say be your authentic self. We said show up and do whatever you can to make it happen. So things were different, and now they're different. And I like it much better today, for sure. So, so thank you for that comment. Anyone else want to share anything? Any ahas? Any thoughts? Do you like these monthly sessions, you guys?
This was fabulous, Kim. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for coming, Rocky. I'm so glad. All right, guys. So listen. So August 1st, we will post the new resource and the new topic for the month, and we will also give a date for our August session. And again, I would love your comments, because, you know, ultimately my goal is to reach people so that they can grow. That's my goal, as you know. And I'm sure there's a little ego attached, but beyond the ego, it really is about touching people, because I just believe so much in growth and how we can learn and grow. And so thank you so much for joining us. You'll also get a link to this if you want to share with any of your colleagues, and it'll be on YouTube. And any questions or anything else that you have, please let me know. Okay?
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, guys, so
Everybody.
much.
Thanks so much.
Have the best day.
Bye, Growth Club.
See you, Sherry.